Welcome to Your Family's Health, the program that focuses on healthcare issues with unique and different modalities for taking charge of your health today. Experts talk weekly with our continuing roster of guests from around the country and right here in Nassau County to keep you up to date on the latest health issues and trends. Take care of your mind, body, and soul. Spend the next half hour with the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and get on the journey to better health.
Hello and welcome to Your Family's Health. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College. And today we're going to learn about something called hemangioma, a common vascular birthmark made of extra blood vessels in the skin. It is a benign, non-cancerous growth. My guest today is Tania Scaduto, the author of the children's book, The Ladybug Without Spots, a story geared towards children with hemangiomas and those who know them. She's a mother of a 2-year-old daughter, Dakota, and is expecting her second child this year. She's also a nursing student at Malloy. Tania, welcome to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jeanine. I appreciate it.
Tell us about your daughter, Dakota.
So Dakota has an infantile hemangioma. She was actually diagnosed with 5. They usually appear shortly after birth. It's really just a really small, starts as a relatively small red mark on the skin. But what really makes it clearly a hemangioma is just the rate of growth. It's not, a scar. It's not just a birthmark that is, stagnant in growth. And it grows pretty quickly, and it is a little bit 3-dimensional. It's above the skin surface. It's almost like a rubbery type of nodule. Mm-hmm. And we recognized it probably after her first month. We noticed just a little small thing on her nose. Then we noticed one on her neck, on her shoulder, and they were getting very dark. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, when you notice, growth and color, obviously that's kind of a red flag. So we brought her to our pediatrician, who referred us to a dermatologist. And obviously, any parent usually tries to find resources on what it could be. And we had a pretty strong inkling that she had infantile hemangiomas on her body.
So did this start growing? Did you notice it? What age did you notice it?
I noticed it probably right about a month old. She had just a tiny little red spot on her nose. That was what I noticed. But I just kind of kept my eye on it. It wasn't really alarming initially. I remember asking my husband, because it was probably there for about a week or 2. And at that point, I was like, do you think that's going to go away? And he's like, yeah, probably. Newborn skin, it goes from you got yellow skin and your pink cheeks. And so it changes quite a bit. But then I was really kind of vigilant. I started noticing, I was like, no, this is getting a little bigger. Mm-hmm. And at her 2-month appointment, it was clear that something was growing. That was there was a unique situation. And just a couple of days before that appointment, I kind of had narrowed down the options. I was like, this could be a hemangioma, but, our doctor gave us that clarity for us.
Mm-hmm. And so if you were to describe the hemangioma, at first it looks like a little pimple, and then now is it irregularly shaped? Is it smooth?
Sure.
Shiny?
So it has... It's not even really a pimple because it's not really 3-dimensional when it starts. It can be, though. I'm speaking specifically about Dakota's, but it's really marked by that kind of red purple color. It can get very, very deep red, and then it tends to be it's raised, so it can almost look like a red, I suppose, a red mole, or a lot of times the colloquial term for it is called a strawberry mark because of the coloring. And then over time, it can grow. It has defined borders, but it can definitely be irregularly shaped for sure.
So, getting into this conversation about hemangiomas, were you familiar with the term?
No,
when you first saw it?
Not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And the internet can be a frightening place, when you try to, navigate it by yourself and stuff. So, fortunately, we were really supported by our medical team with her, but we were not familiar with it. Hemangiomas, if you look it up, the reality is there's a very, very wide range of what they look like, the impact that they can have from visibly to, physiologically actually impacting the body. So, you see the whole gamut, and you're looking at your, 6 to 8-week-old baby, and, you get a little bit nervous and concerned about, what does the future look like? So it was new territory for us.
Yes, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So when you saw the hemangioma, you were told that your child has hemangioma. What causes it? Did you find any kind of research
Sure.
as to what causes it, and is it heredity, familial at all, or?
Yeah, those are great questions. So there's not a known cause for it. Some research says it could have some influence from the placenta, but there's really no clear basis for it. One of the first things when I met Dakota's dermatologist, one of the first things she said to me was, this had nothing to do with, any choices you made during pregnancy. It's not genetic. It's not hereditary. And, I'm assuming probably a lot of parents might feel some sort of guilt or a certain type of way, like, hey, could I have done something differently? But in these cases, you really can't. We know that it affects girls more than boys, and it affects about 4 to 9% of babies. So it's relatively common when you look at the numbers, 1 to 2 kids out of, 10 to 20 kids. But no, there was nothing that we could, have done to prevent it.
Yeah. So how did you feel? I know as a mother, having a daughter, how did you feel when you saw these?
Sure.
Hemangiomas?
So probably the biggest hurdle for me was actually talking about treatment, because Dakota's was primarily cosmetic. A lot of times a hemangioma can grow if it obstructs the eye or obstructs, your nasal passage, or other just open kind of orifices on the body. You might need a surgery. There's a lot of, implications for something like that. So hers being cosmetic, it was very difficult for me to choose to take any type of treatment toward it. I'm generally just personally pretty conservative when it comes to intervening, with medicine or anything. She was so young. But after discussing at length with her doctor, because also it was, it could grow to the point that it could possibly obstruct a nostril or something like that. And plus the amount that she had, it was highly recommended that we had that we treat it with some sort of, in this case we used a drug called propranolol. For me, that was the biggest hurdle. Yeah. As she gets older, Dakota's 2 now, she understands that she has a hemangioma. I do think about the social implications for her. We get questions almost daily when we're out. My initial kind of gut was like, oh man, this kind of stinks that I have to give her medication. There was a lot of side effects that I wasn't really crazy about. But those concerns have kind of drifted now more toward social implications.
Yes. I know, because children sometimes can be, a little bit abrupt or mean, when it comes down to socialization, and they see something as a little different. Is that a concern for you as a mom? Yeah, yes, a little bit. I think that's a concern for any mom, whether their child has a hemangioma or not. I think there's, every person has a vulnerability. I say, everybody has a figurative hemangioma on their nose, might not be on your nose, but everybody has something. And especially as parents, we're naturally, I think, just intrinsically protective of our children. We want the world to accept them. But I really focus, and my husband also, we really focus on self-acceptance, because that's really where accepting other people starts. So rather than worrying about the reaction of other people, we really try to instill confidence in Dakota, even at 2 years old, explaining to her what she has when someone asks a question about it, giving her the opportunity to answer, or answering in a way that is just empathetic. People are curious. Yeah. Sometimes the delivery of that curiosity can fall short, and that's a teaching point also. But for the most part, we try to just address it, head on. You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, and today you're learning about hemangiomas, a common vascular birthmark made of extra blood vessels in the skin. It is benign, non-cancerous growth. My guest today is Tania Scaduto, the author of a children's book, The Ladybug Without Spots, a story geared towards children with hemangiomas and those who know them. She's a mother of a 2-year-old daughter, Dakota, who was diagnosed with multiple hemangiomas. So as we were talking about your daughter, tell me, is there ever a surgical treatment for the hemangiomas where they can remove them?
Yeah, there are a lot of treatments available, and I'm by no means an expert. So I would definitely, if if your child has a hemangioma and you're looking at treatments, I would definitely, recommend, seeking out a dermatologist or, starting with your pediatrician for the best option. But surgery is definitely an option. It's not super common, but it's definitely, required, especially in instances where the hemangioma could potentially rupture. A lot of times they can grow very large and really swell, or is just, or if the hemangioma is impeding mobility, or
obstructive, as you said,
or obstructive, like unable to breathe or eat. And those cases absolutely do happen. So surgery can definitely be an option as well. There's topical agents, there's oral agents, there's a lot of different kind of routes that someone can go.
So tell me about your book. What really prompted you to write a book?
Sure.
This is great.
So The Ladybug Without Spots, it started as a small poem for my daughter. I love writing and singing to her, and what better inspiration than your child. And with Dakota's hemangioma, it truly did look like a ladybug without spots, a big one on her nose. But that's what it looked like to me, and that's what I would refer to it as. And it was a little poem that I would, just kind of recite to her. And, even at her age, I think she was probably about 3 or 4 months when I wrote it. And when
Can you give us a little snippet of it?
A snippet of it?
Just one liner.
I'm going to give you the end. I'm going to give spoiler alert.
Okay.
So next time you meet someone with a mark on their skin, remember the ladybug without spots and the light from within.
Oh, I like that
All
already.
right. That's a little teaser. So.
Wow, I like that. See, you're making me really want to read the book now.
Yeah, it's a sweet book, but it was mostly people's reaction, their curiosity, their sometimes just stares, not being sure what to say. And the people that were most, I'll say, courageous about asking questions were kids, and I had no problem explaining it to an adult. I'd say, oh, it's like a benign tumor, benign growth, using all these terms that adults are generally familiar with. But sometimes when a kid would ask me, I would be stumped. They're like, what's on her nose? And I'm trying to simplify it. I'm like, well, it's kind of like,
right?
Yeah, and a lot of times the parents would say, hey, shh, don't be rude. That's not nice. I'm like, no, hey, their curiosity.
How does Dakota feel about those kinds of questions?
She doesn't respond for herself yet. With us, she's aware. She points to her birthmark. She says, birthmark. She'll call it a birthmark, hemangioma, beauty mark. Okay. So I think in general, as a 2-year-old, when a stranger asks a question, you tend to freeze at first. But she's a really confident little girl, and I'm just hoping that the way that we answer, we choose to educate every single time. And that was the goal of the book. Was I saw an opportunity because people were curious. Kids were the ones that were really, had kind of like the gall to ask, so to speak. And I was like, I'm going to turn this into a book and it's an opportunity to educate not only kids, but parents also that might be too shy to ask, but when they see it. But no, Dakota, she's okay with it. And she points out my birthmarks and so she's pretty self-aware. So, and we just hope to continue to kind of just foster that for her.
So how therapeutic was it for you writing the book? I know you say
it was, it was a really rewarding experience. I was happy, just completing it. I had no goals of, I wasn't like, oh, this is going to be a bestseller. This is like, the fact that I had an idea and I went after it, and then I was holding the book one day in my hand with, several boxes of the book behind me. That was really rewarding. A lot of times I think that people have an idea or, you just spark a thought that would be like, that's kind of cool. And it kind of just dies in the grave of lost ideas. And so this one was one that I really followed through. It took me several months to complete. I was really proud, honestly, when it was done, with no expectation of what was going to happen with the book. I was really proud when it was done.
And this is geared towards children.
It's a baby board book. So it's a cardboard book.
Okay.
But that being said, I think it's geared toward parents also. It's an easy read, parents. Don't worry.
And parents can read it with their child.
Definitely. Yeah. It's geared toward little kids. And the impact has been definitely beyond my expectations.
So is this a website that you have? Or how do we get the book?
Sure. Anyway? So the Ladybug Without Spots.com. That's the website. That's where you can learn more about hemangiomas. You can learn about our personal journey with Dakota. You can reach me there. I respond to every single email.
Cool.
Yeah, and that's really where you could learn more about the book and our personal journey.
So what do you advise, parents if they have a child with hemangioma? What kind of support when you reached out to the community, was that a resource there for you to receive that kind of support that you needed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are definitely a lot of support groups and people that find strength in those communities. Like, fortunately, the internet, like I said earlier, can be a scary place, but it could also be a place of refuge in a lot of instances. And there's a lot of Facebook groups for parents with hemangiomas where you could really, feel free to express your concerns or see, what routes other people have taken. So I absolutely encourage people to go that route. Me personally, I actually didn't do too much of a deep dive into those social groups. I was more doing just kind of like my own research on it. And I was really focusing a lot on what her doctors were saying and the discussions just that we were having. I tend to maybe get overwhelmed with too many opinions sometimes. So I try to have, one kind of like filter. I do my research, but I was like, let me really create my plan with my doctor. But having that support is absolutely important, whether you're getting that from your doctor, your spouse, or just, a community, whether online or in person. I'm a huge advocate for that. And they're out there for sure.
So how did you initially know which doctor to seek help from? A dermatologist, an oncologist? How did you know where to go? Did you go to your primary provider?
Yes, that's a great question. I started with my pediatrician. Okay. So early on, even before we knew there was a hemangioma, you read all the mommy blogs and this and that. And I said, there's so many ways to, skin a cat, so to say. And I said, I was like, as we, I agreed with my husband, as we journey with Dakota, as she grows up, we found a pediatrician that she's absolutely phenomenal, that we really, truly trust. And she is the one that recommended the dermatologist. Okay. So we trusted her word. We went with the dermatologist. We had a good feeling about her. And then we got treatment for Dakota for about a little bit over a year.
So the dermatology visit, did they do a biopsy of the hemangioma?
They don't do a biopsy. It's really, you can diagnose it really visually. It's a very, very clear, distinct type of mark on the child. So even our pediatrician she was very gentle in terms of presenting it, but she was like, she's like, this looks like it's a hemangioma, but to confirm, let's go over to the dermatologist. And, and then just one thing led to the next at that point.
And so when you went to the dermatologist, it's a matter of them just visualizing the area, and she was able right off the bat to say it was hemangioma.
Yes, absolutely. They had encouraged, because of the amount of hemangiomas Dakota has, if you have more than 3 hemangiomas, they encourage a liver, like a CAT scan of the liver, so that because a lot of times there's a tie between the hemangioma and you can possibly have hemangiomas on your liver. So that was the only other kind of aspect that we had to look at.
Concerned with.
Yeah, and we did. And fortunately, everything was in the clear. So like I said, it was really just for us a concern of just, it's cosmetic, which, like I said, has a lot of different implications. But our route was, in the grand scheme of things, when we learned the effects that hemangiomas could have, we felt ultimately like very, fortunate that it was something that is cosmetic. And what's worth mentioning, hemangiomas, most of them do fade by the age of 10.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So they do decrease in size.
Correct. So they have...
that's a question that I really wanted to ask you in terms of the probability of increasing
the evolution
size.
of it. It really only grows for like the first year of life. And then at that point, it kind of goes through like an involution stage. It's kind of just stagnant for maybe a year or two. And at that point, it starts to really decrease and hopefully fade. It can fade up until the age of 10. So with Dakota's treatments, really all of her hemangiomas faded because obviously that was, the intention. But the one on her nose, while it definitely has faded and shrunken a little bit, it's definitely, you can still, it's very visible and, gets a lot of questions. So.
Yeah. So you're expecting another baby, I'm seeing.
I am. We are. We're very excited. We're expecting a little girl next month.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yes.
So, are you concerned at all with your new baby, with the hemangiomas? Or
sure. Hemangiomas are not the first thing on my mind. I just think about her overall, health. And honestly, if she has a hemangioma, I feel like we're better equipped this time, than the first time around. But like any parent, you just want a healthy child, and you want to be, just able to just provide anything that child needs, medically, emotionally. And so we're just praying for a healthy, happy baby.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, and today you're learning about hemangiomas. a common vascular birthmark made of extra blood vessels in the skin. It is benign, non-cancerous growth. My guest today is Tania Scaduto, the author of a children's book, The Ladybug Without Spots, a story geared towards children with hemangiomas and those who know them. She's a mother of a 2-year-old daughter, Dakota, who was diagnosed with multiple hemangiomas. So you must have been really, really relieved to know that this is non-cancerous.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
you see a growth. You see,
That's the first thing I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, the internet kind of like quelled that for us because, like I said, I had kind of narrowed in on the hemangioma, and I was doing a lot of research before her first doctor's appointment. But, you're still holding your breath before you see the doctor, and even saying, that you had to have that liver CAT scan, that you're holding your breath again. And But I'm learning that parenthood is you're holding your breath a lot.
Yeah.
Whether your child has a hemangioma or not.
Yeah.
But fortunately, everything was worked out okay, and we're super blessed that it was not malignant.
So does Dakota approve of this book?
Yeah, Dakota definitely does. She loves it. It's actually really sweet. She's at an age now. When we first read it to her, she was, just a couple of months old. And, you get the coos and the smiles. And, there's a couple of pages that she really likes. But now, I read the dedication. The book is dedicated to Dakota.
Yeah.
And now every time she sees her book, she looks at it and looks at me and she says, "For me?"
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, "Yeah, sweetheart." I was like, "That's for you."
Yeah.
I was like, "And for a lot of other kids in the world."
Now,
But
do you have a picture on the book, on the back? Or
on the back, there's just a picture of me and her.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice.
She definitely inspired it.
So what was the most rewarding part of the book?
The most rewarding part of the book, hands down, has been the impact. Like, I never imagined it would reach the amount of people that it has reached. I have sold in about 3 countries outside of the United States, and
that's huge.
Several states. Yeah, almost, I'd say probably about 40 states or so if I count. I never expected that, and the response from parents has just been absolutely fantastic. So sometimes they'll send me a picture. Please, if you got the book and you want to share a picture of your kid like smiling or anything, that is the best part. It makes it really real. And back to my point about, never not following through on an idea, it just makes me wonder, like, wow, it just gives me courage if I have an idea in the future to pursue it. Like, you have no idea the community that you can create or the community that you're a part of, that when you might feel isolated. So don't be afraid to, pursue something and, be a little bit vulnerable and throw yourself out there. So
what would you say, now that you are in this position where you know what it feels like for someone to ask you questions about your daughter or questions about, what is that? What is your recommendation for parents if they're really trying to ask questions about another child?
Yeah.
Should they be sensitive and, really not talk about it? Kind of, how people stare at you and don't want to say anything and turn the other way. Is it best to just say, what is that?
That's a really tricky situation. So I would say, I'm a proponent of talking. Like, I love when you get the dialogue going, that's when awareness really starts. So I think, as a parent of a child with a hemangioma or a vascular birthmark, or something, even just anything that, warrants a question, as the parent, I really try and accept people's curiosity, even if sometimes the delivery falls a little short. And that's when your kind of parent instinct wants to kick in and you're like, leave me alone. You want to say something maybe not so nice back. But it stems from a place ultimately of curiosity.
Right.
And that's an opportunity for us to educate. So if you're curious about something, be polite. I would just say, try and be mindful of your tone or the way you're saying something. But I definitely encourage people to ask questions. I will even volunteer, what's on Dakota's face if I notice someone's maybe staring or their kid wants to say something. And, the parents, ribbing the kid saying, "Hey, shh, don't look." I say, "Hey, no, it's completely fine,"
Right.
And so I think the more we can talk about it without being overly sensitive to it, which takes, it takes a good amount of grit. But I think the more comfortable that people become, with that situation. And a lot of time that's how your community gets bigger. They say, "Oh, I knew a kid that had that. Oh, I went to school with, my brother had that." So, I think that there's much more positives in asking than in not.
So what about, you talked about Dakota being very, very confident, having hemangiomas. How do you continue to make sure that her confidence level, particularly during the adolescence phase, is always intact and always above. So where if she encounters, when she's going into this intimacy phase of her life,
Sure.
that she can maintain this level of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hope for every parent, every parent. So, I'm a super optimist. I have rose-colored glasses, so I don't want to even think about adolescence. But number one, I think it starts by leading by example, 1,000%. And I think about that every single time I answer someone. If I'm rude, Dakota's going to feel like something's wrong with her if I have to respond rudely. So leading by example, I think, is probably one of the most important things, how I carry myself, how my husband carries herself, and how we treat her. And then also just reinforcing her qualities and not focusing on, even though she is absolutely beautiful and we do tell her quite a bit, but really not focusing on those qualities, the intangible qualities, how smart you are, how intelligent you are. And those are the things that the kid will bring into the world, hopefully, and value about themselves as they continue to get older. So, that's really the hope.
I would say that this particular book is a real goal accomplisher for you, being able to put your words and your feelings in a book.
Yes.
And not just for you, for your daughter, for your husband, and everyone. How does that make you feel to having accomplished this?
Oh, honestly, like I said, it made me feel really...
I know you were in nursing school, but...
It made me feel really proud, and I'm just so grateful for Dakota, because when I see the impact the book has had on so many people, if Dakota was born any other way, this book would not exist.
You would not have done the book.
This book would not exist. It wouldn't have touched as many, children and adults and parents and lives. I've had dermatology clinics reach out to me, which if you're a dermatology clinic or, I love to donate books. May 15th is actually Vascular Birthmark Awareness Day. I donate.
Wow, I didn't know that there was such thing.
I think there's a day for everything these days.
Right.
But I'll take advantage to celebrate. But I'm almost sad. I was like, wow, if Dakota was born any other way, which I would never have it any different, the ripple effect would just not be there. So yeah.
So thank you so much for this contribution, not just to your family, but to the community. And I'm noticing the world at large. Thank you for this contribution.
Yeah,
to share.
My pleasure. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you for being here, Tania Scaduto, the author of the children's book, The Ladybug Without Spots, a story geared towards children with hemangiomas and those who know them. We appreciate all of this information, and we hope you stay healthy and continue to do the great work that you're doing. And please say hi to Dakota.
I definitely will. Thanks, Jeanine.
And we're happy to hear that she is doing very, very well. So this is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College. And we want to thank you for listening to this week's edition of Your Family's Health.
We'd like to get your feedback on your family's health. Send your comments by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu. Podcasts of today's show are available on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This program was produced at the studios of Nassau Community College in cooperation with the nursing department. Join us next week for another edition of Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.